Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. So, this is a little different. As you all know, for many years, I traveled on an RV. Her name was Old Gypsy. Me and Dragonflies traveled on her for about 5, 6 years. And then before that, I had a Winnebago Brave. So, the only time I was ever overweight is when I found a hill of cast iron, and I actually bought the whole hill. And there was roughly about 50 pieces of cast iron. So I educated myself really quick on cast iron because cast iron is absolutely awesome. It can last a lifetime if taken care of properly by you, and you can hand it on. So we're going to give people a couple minutes to roll in, but in the meantime, I put together a little video of the cast iron and jadeite and different things that we had at some of the shows. So I'm going to show that. It's about a couple minutes, through 2, 3 minutes long, and then I'll be right back on. But we're really going to talk about cast iron, and we're going to talk about myths, identification, uh, we're going to talk about some history about them, about the most expensive cast iron, about the oldest cast iron. And I think that this is something that could really help people. It's a little different prep because, we don't think of cast iron as a prep, but I'll tell you what, get smacked upside your head with a cast iron skillet. Well, cast iron comes in handy for a couple things. You can cook that fried chicken. I just made eggs this morning in a cast iron skillet with fried potatoes. Absolutely delicious. So I hope you enjoy this. This is part one. We're going to have about 3 parts because otherwise I'd probably overwhelm you with information and data about cast iron. So let's watch the video. This is when we were out on the road, and it's just a quick snippet of things that we accumulated and the cast iron pieces that we accumulated, and then I'll be right back on.
I start with a few notes and then I turn into a melody. Write me some lyrics and sing a sweet, soft harmony. Lay down some rhythm and let me find a groove. And I'll tell your story. You see, that's what I do. I am music, I am a song. Been with you down every road you've ever traveled on. Helped you dance, watched you cry. I'm the soundtrack of your life. And when everything is gone, we'll still sing along. I am music, I am a song.
So I'm going to pull that down for right now. Okay. So I'm glad everybody's here. And I'm going to take down the back screen because I actually want to show some of the pieces, and I want to talk about some of the important information about cast iron. So first, I want to break some myths because I already see some myths in the chat. Cast iron. There's myths and misconception about cast iron, and there's several of them. I do want to say that. One thing that I want to say about cast iron, we're going to start with this, is cast iron dates back into the early 1800s. One of the oldest companies was Griswold, also Erie, Lodge, uh, Burlington, and Wagner. Those are probably the oldest ones. Does anybody in the chat right now know what the most expensive piece of cast iron that recently sold for? Does anybody know what the maker was and what cast iron pan it was? Anybody? Probably not. So, one of the most expensive cast iron pieces that recently came up is a super rare piece from the 1890s. It's called a spider skillet, and it sold for $8,000. $8,000. There's many Wagner and Griswold pieces that have sold up to $1,500 a piece. There's also a Victoria 10-inch that is very, very valuable. Some people collect them. Some people use them. But Lodge is still manufactured in the United States, and many people don't realize that. The enameled castware Lodge pieces are made in China. There is a big difference, okay? There is a big difference between those. I want to say that Lodge was founded in 1896 by Joseph Lodge. It is one of America's oldest. Wagner was 1891 to 1952, and Wagner was rarely manufactured after 1998. In 2008, the company who produced Wagner and bought out Wagner closed its doors. So no longer is there pieces of Wagner being made. Cast iron cookware, there is lots of myths and misconception. One, a lot of people believe that cast iron cookware is virtually indestructible. And I will say this, that is false. Cast iron is durable, but it's not unbreakable. Like glass, the properties that make cast iron also make it really, really brittle. So cast iron subject to impact or twisting force will actually break it before it bends. Heating an empty cast iron pan or a large pan over a small burner too quickly may also result in cracking or irreversible warping. And the thing is that I want to say about cast iron, a couple things that you can do is when you have a cast iron pan, I'm going to show you one of ours here. When you have a cast iron pan, this is a small one, this is a Lodge, and this is a small one. This is I believe a 6.5. What you can do is set this on a flat surface and do the wobble test. The wobble test. So by pushing on a corner of it, usually where this little notch is, you can actually see if it wobbles back and forth before you purchase it. If it's wobbling, it is warped. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's a terrible piece. It means it's not as good as a flat, sturdy piece. But I have some that are warped, just a hair. Excuse me. The other thing that you may want to look for is on the bottom of the piece itself. If you see a lot of encrusting, or if you see major brownish, blackish buildup, it could cause a problem when you're cooking for uneven cooking. But overall, cast iron, even with that, I have one of those handy, and we use it all the time. I think it's this one. No, that's my Wagner. This one. This one. As you can see there, you can see this is a Birmingham, but you can see that there's some damage to it on the outside, kind of a buildup. And I'm not going to remove that buildup. I use this on a regular basis. There's no problem with it because it's so flat. When you do the wobble test on this, there's no wobble. There's no warp. You can also look for cracks. One of the biggest things is they get cracks in the handle. It doesn't mean that it's unusable. It just means that it could end up breaking on you. Once it's broken, it's a decorative piece is probably what it's going to boil down to. This one is a Wagner. But if you notice there is no Wagner emblem. Wagner has been around so long. When it first started, there was no foundry mark. There was not a mark at all. And many people don't realize that. They always are looking for the ones that say Wagnerware. Wagnerware does not necessarily mean it's a Wagner. I mean that it does, but it doesn't necessarily is not the only identifier. The number 2 question, we'll see if anybody knows this. The best, easiest way to clean buildup from a cast iron pan is to burn it off in a fire. Is that true or false? I'd love to see your comments on this one. Anybody? The best and easiest way to clean buildup from a cast iron pan is to burn it off in a fire. Is that true or false? Does anybody have any idea? Nobody wants to answer. You don't want to be put on the spot. Okay. All right. That answer is false. That answer is false. While fire will indeed typically completely remove the buildup, intense heat can damage the pan itself, either by warping it or cracking it, or by potentially altering the molecular structure of the iron, making it irreversibly scaly. Okay. And that I would suspect is what happened to that Wagner pan over the years, is that somebody put it over a fire thinking they were going to clean it, and in return they damaged it. But it still is good because the inside did not get damaged. So the correct answer to that is false, folks. False. Thank you, Dreaded Seeker. Dreaded Seeker got it right. Who else got it right? Not many of you. Most people said true. Number 3, the coating of seasoning on a pan imparts flavor to cooked food. Is that true or false? I'm going to go through some of these. That answer is false. The term seasoning, as it pertains to cast iron cookware, applies to the buildup over time of the polymerized and carbonized cooking fats, and it results in a corrosion-resistant non-stick coating. So it's actually false. It actually builds up a layer. And it has nothing to do with food seasoning. In this case, the meaning is akin to calling an experienced person a seasoned veteran or properly dried firewood seasoned, right? Traditional cleaning methods should leave no residue, which would affect the taste of the prepared foods. Although oily fish might be an undesirable exception. So you want to remember that about fish. They're uncertain still, and this is a dear friend of mine. He has 40 years of collecting cast iron. He is a specialist. I'm trying to get him to come on the show, and I'm hoping that he will accept my offer. I'm going to try to do 3 parts to this. So the claim is often heard from sellers of used, unrefurbished pans, more than likely in a misguided attempt to make thickly encrusted pieces seem more valuable, but they're not. Number 4, the large number sign on the bottom of a pan or on the top of a pan handle indicates the diameter in inches. Is that true or false? Actually, that is false. The numbers were an early convention used to tell you what size of wood stove eye a pan could fit on. Sizes were not really consistent across all brands, and no one maker's number 8 pan may not have fit another maker's number 8 stove eye. The numbering system continued to be used for some time, even after gas and electric cooktops came about. So there's a lot of assumptions about cast iron that really aren't true. The small letters that are inscribed on cast iron pans indicate the manufacturer. False. Small letters, inscribed on the cast iron pieces are pattern identifiers. They're pattern identifiers. Multiple patterns were used to create the molds. And many times before our time, and Montgomery Ward, Sears, J.C. Penney, and the person that roamed around and sold cast iron out of a covered wagon or out of the back trunk of their car, they would carry these pieces. Many foundries actually produced the same pieces, but the molds were a little different. The sizes were just a little different. So the small letters were actually the pattern. And that's very important to know. One way of keeping track was the unique pattern made, which the piece was necessarily either for quality control or piecework payment. And small raised letters on pan bottoms are typically the molder's make marks. They're stamped into the sand mold. And I think this one, let me see here. I have one of them that does have it. Let me see. I think it's this one. Yeah, this one right here has a B right there. You see that B? So that B is actually the pattern for the cast iron. It was the molder's mark, and it was stamped into the sand mold, and it was just prior to casting by a foundryman in order to keep track of the daily production of those cast iron pieces. So that's another really neat one that I think that many people don't know. The old iron are mined and used to make cast iron cookware around the turn of the century. Early 1900s was superior to the use that used later in the 20th century. That is also false. The iron does not exist in nature in its pure form. While there's lots of variations in the way the composition was, between iron are obtained from different sources, and the smelting process used to extract that out, the iron out, would have removed most of it, if not all of the undesirable impurities. So the iron that they used really was the cast iron is not used as smelted, but rather ingredients such as carbon and silicone are added. And vintage cast iron really gets me going. Okay, I love the old ways. I love the old stuff, and I think that many times we have all these misconceptions about cast iron. So I wanted to bring that up first and foremost. One thing that a lot of people, and this is kind of cool, a cracked pan can be detected by listening to the sound produced by tapping on it. So back in the late 1800s, what they would do is they would actually take a wooden spoon. That was like the go-to thing, right? And they would take that wooden spoon and they would tap that wooden spoon on the top of the cast iron piece. And by tapping it, it almost rang out like a bell when it was tapped. And the really cool thing is an intact pan has this definite ringing sound and while being hung or held in a certain way. And if you think about it, on the stagecoaches, right? They would hang these off of the side. They'd be just jingling, right? And so they would tap them, and by tapping them, they would get that ringing sound, and they would know that that was definitely a great piece. There was nothing wrong with it, and they would know that it wasn't cracked from all the moving back and forth. That really comes from the lost ways from like the late 18, early 1900s. I think that it is probably one of the best tests. You can't rely on it completely. Of course, you're going to use visual inspection of a clean pan under really good lighting to see like is there cracks in it. The crack is a possibility that could cause concerns for you because of the way it is. Oh, I forgot to get the little one. Hold on a minute. Now, there was miniature cookware, and a lot of people just think of these miniature cookware as decorative pieces. But the really cool thing is they were made for kids' toys. And they made these for children's toys, which is pretty cool, right? It's pretty cool. And look how tiny this is. But actually, these are made to cook on. So that's really a cool thing. Is you can I don't know what you're cooking on it. Maybe a grilled cheese sandwich. I don't know. This is one of the newer pieces that I picked up. This is a 2020 stamped piece, but we use it just as decorative piece, right? But these actually were a salesman's tool. They were a giveaway, and then many kids in the early 1900s, in the 1920s and 30s, began using these as a toy. And so that's kind of cool. You have one of those from your daughter for cookies. Oh, okay. You could put a little grilled cheese sandwich, let them make their own little grilled cheese sandwich on it or something. But they are really a neat piece. Miniature cookware, they said was made to be, like a lot of people believe, it was only made to be given away as a salesman's sample. That is false. Those tiny vintage cast iron and aluminum, they were actually manufactured by the major name brands and others as children's toys. And some of them, they were mostly made as to look at a full size standard one as a little one. And they were actually used for cooking as well as play. But I think a lot of people don't realize that they gave away a lot of these small ones, these toy ones, for kids back in the early 1900s and the late 1800s. It was kind of like the salesman, pitch, but it was really actually a piece for the kids. One thing that is a belief that many people believe is cast iron is revered for its even heating ability. It really depends on how you define even heating. If you believe that the heat applied by a burner will spread evenly throughout the pan, then the answer would be false, right? Cast iron is actually a relatively poor heat conductor, which means that the area of a pan to which heat is applied, right, will increase in temperature, but the rest of it will diminish in temperature. So the further away you get from the burner or the heat source, the less you get because its density, right, allows it to store more heat per pound relative to other metals. And so there's kind of a misconception about that. A lot of people get very confused because they're like, yeah, but it can store heat versus the ability to heat uniformly. So there's two different things that we're looking at. Number 10 is washing a cast iron pan with soap will ruin the seasoning. How many of you believe that that is true? Do you think if you wash a cast iron pan with soap that the seasoning will be ruined? Anybody? True or false? Truthful troll. It is false. It's false. Sorry to tell you, it's false, folks. At one time, I truly believed that if you washed a seasoned cast iron pan, that you were ruining it. It is false in most cases. A well seasoned pan will be armored with this tough, near plastic layer of cooking fat and carbon. And it is capable of withstanding cooking temperatures of several hundred degrees. Also, normally unnecessary washing with warm water and regular dishwashing liquid, if you use a non abrasive pad or scrubber, will not materially affect a well established seasoned cast iron pan. And a lot of people, I think the big thing is it should not be left submerged in the water. And that's where people screw up is they leave it in there, they wander off and they come back and then they have other issues. So you shouldn't leave it just submerged. You should clean it and put it up. However, if you do, it should never, ever, ever be ran through a dishwasher, ever, regardless of how well seasoned they are. One thing that I did notice in the chat, and we're going to talk about that dreaded secret too, is lye soap and different ways you can clean cast iron. I think that there's so much information out there about cast iron that it's probably one of my favorite things is the old vintage stuff, cast iron. I love jadeite. I love the old tools from the 18 and 1900s. And so I was like, I think we should talk about cast iron because a lot of people have misconceptions about cast iron. Belief number 10 and a half, right? Acidic foods should never be cooked in cast iron pans. This is one of those questions that we do need to talk about because that's neither true or false. It can actually be both. While it is true that acidic foods will cause iron to leach into them, a well-established seasoned layer will provide that barrier between the acidity and the iron. The same may not be true, however, of newly seasoned pans. So a pan with insufficient established seasoning, like I'm talking like a year or longer, would cause some serious problems. Any acidic foods like tomatoes, liquids like wines, vinegars, anything like that could cause you some major problems. It may result in this nasty metallic taste to the food. And you will also see a discoloration of the food, especially like beans or spinach. These are just a few of the misconceptions about cast iron. The other thing that I want to talk about is some things that should get mentioned. That the markings on cast iron pans are stamped into them. That is false. Cast iron, at least that used for cookware, is not imprinted upon the stamping. The markings may have been stamped into the pattern, and they were usually made of aluminum, but they were cast into the pan. The same is true of hammered finished cast iron pieces. A lot of people believe that cast iron is so porous, right? And that is false. Many have been led to believe that not only is cast iron porous, but those pores expand and contract with changes in temperature, allowing the oil or other foreign substances to like adhere, but to be absorbed or sealed into it, right? But even polished iron is not completely flat, and any voids are really microscopic. So they're going to result from the removal of like this graphite, and it's a carbon component of the cast iron at the surface. At the surface, right? So I think that cast iron cooking is awesome. I think that the food is fabulous. Like the food is really, 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 it is, it's awesome to cook on cast iron. I love fried chicken on cast iron. I really do. It's something about it. To me, it tastes better. But I think that a lot of people believe that cast iron has a dietary iron for them. And I want to say that that is false. I've seen somebody say that in the chat. That is false. Once a pan is seasoned, right? What do I mean by seasoning? Basically, you're building up a layer, and you can do it with grease, on butters, whatever you use. We use grease. It actually builds a layer across the cast iron. For example, this one I cooked in this morning, right? See how nice and shiny it is? And what happens is Patriot No Jab, it actually builds up a layer of across it. And so it just builds up this, I don't even know how to explain it. It just builds up a layer of protection of the cast iron. So it's grease. It's grease or whatever you're using to cook in. And also, we don't wash ours. We wipe them out after we use them, and you can see how the grease is taken to that one. This one you can see does not have the seasoning. This is a lodge one that I just recently got, and so I am going to be working on seasoning this. Butter and get it hot. That is a good point, and it does work. Truthful troll. What I want to say about that is it's very, very important not to heat up the pan really fast. Let it gradually heat up. That's what I was talking about earlier. But talking about the dietary iron, that is false. Once it is seasoned, the oil carbon coatings create that barrier between the food being cooked and the iron. And that's really important. Um, if one were to cook food, especially food with an abundance of moisture or acidity, right, in an unseasoned pan, however, there would be a transfer of iron into the food. So that's something that you want to think about because it would occur. Is it healthy? Cooking in an unseasoned cast iron is really not normally done. It should be something that you don't do. Individuals can get an iron overload, and it is an actual. I can't. It's hemo something. Hold on, let me think. Chromatitis. I don't know I'm saying it correctly, but I'm real close. And it would probably be best not to do that. You don't want to overload yourself and end up with some type of disorder. You should avoid food that's cooked in any cat that would be cooked in cast iron if you have that overload of an iron problem. After using and washing a cast iron pan, people say it must immediately be reseasoned. That's false. Washing with non-abrasive pads and common household dishwashing liquid will not remove the coating of the fat and the carbon that goes together that creates the seasoning of a cast iron pan. So yeah, well, and see that's the difference. If she was on a gas stove, I'm sure it built up the heat. It wasn't just like boom, rapid, and that's a big thing. Bacon grease is basically tallow is animal fat rendered down. Exactly. So you could use bacon grease. There's a lot of things that you could use. Hey, all American. I want to say that a lot of times people think that they can't fix a rusty cast iron pan. And I will say this: I have restored hundreds of cast iron pans because the cat restoring a piece of cast iron is really not that difficult. the thing is, one of the easiest ways is to use an oven cleaner. Now, if you use an oven cleaner, it's going to take, it's a long process. It is a very long process. Some people worry about, like, can I do this? Am I going to be able to do this? And you definitely can. I just think that so many times people don't want to take the time to do it. So we are going to discuss today a little bit about that in particular, because I think it's very, very important to be able to restore cast iron, because they're valuable pieces. And not only are they valuable, they're very collectible. And you can basically, the, I don't know, I guess I love cast iron. And so you can actually strip them down and clean them. One of the basic, easy ways is a vinegar bath or an aerosol oven cleaner. The advanced way is what Dreaded Seeker spoke about, which a lot of people are scared to do, which is a lye bath. And lye bath is not difficult. It's not hard. It's just taking the time to learn the process. I'm going to post some things on the website. I mean, not on the website, on the community page, so that you have ways and resources to be able to do it if you've never dealt with it. I would not use a wire brush. Sorry, Kentucky. I wouldn't use a wire brush. Maybe a little less abrasive. I don't know. I treat cast iron really special because I like it. You can use a lye bath. You can use electrolysis. You can use a molasses soak. Molasses soaks work really well. And if you use a molasses soak, it's easy. It's easy peasy, right? So let's talk about the first one. A lot of people go, aerosol oven cleaners. I don't really like aerosols, right? I don't. But you can buy the Easy Off heavy duty oven spray, and it works well. You can use cheaper store brands, but that one has been my go to if I really have a stubborn piece. When I was in Brown, pieces, so I got an experience cleaning the crap after a while, about 20 pieces. There's like whole uh, the thing about is they're not healthy health. But I do use that ingredient, use active ingredients of the eye. So